Yeah.
I was the bell rings. The glory and the veneer with which charity workers are treated hides the ugly truth on the ground, the mistreatment that they go through, and the kind of mismanagement that patients and workers are involved in, and at the same many circumstances, exploitation and the fall, it often reduces the society produces. Just recognize this as being so beautiful. And some people not sacrifice. And these people are property do not have proper shelter for an extended period. So this is what charity workers get away with society, because you often this of NGOs often doing what it means to be in this often trying necessarily for these people to push for the charity, and especially the state requires often just a renewal operation activity. You have result reverse what people often charity to up for a lot of development. It did as to sign up that has the most instrumental. That looks good. They want to participate in these things. It creates a purpose and compete with each other, and creates a rat race with who has the ability to be glorified the most, and therefore attract the most number of individuals. We want to attract rich elite like Oxford school kids who want to sign up for the organization because it looks good on their resume. But oftentimes, because of the over-glorification, these people are not ready to spend half a year in Africa. What they do is often they volunteerism tours, right, where they can post a picture with a Somali orphan and post in their Facebook of how well they're helping society. Oftentimes what it encourages is a lot of part-time participation, which results in very unsustainable things that this NGO does. So what this NGO does is, because it wants to be the one that's most glorified, that wants to see the most attractive place where a lot of volunteers sign up, they don't want to do things like long-term construction of wealth within this village, which takes a lot of investment, which takes a lot of time, and therefore it's very difficult to calculate the returns. Instead, what they do is a lot of things that allows people to be attracted to the charity organization and continue the cycle of making that charity organization popular. Therefore, a lot of sustainable and difficult projects that need to be taken up by limited charity organizations are often ignored for a lot of things that over-glorify them and a lot of things that attract people, and the cycle of glorification hence continues. Before I move on to let me take it first.
To an organization, the workers get more money and people on the ground get less because you simply want more.
No, I don't think that's how the division of the pie works. Just because I pay someone who is literally keeping my organization sustainable takes away money from people on the ground. Oftentimes the money goes to things like advertisement, the money goes to things like management and a lot of the parties, networking parties that they hold up with their other sponsors, as opposed to paying their people who are literally upholding their organization, right? I don't think that's a sacrifice that we have to make under our side. Lastly, and very crucially, why does it allow a lot of mismanagement and exploitation on the part of these NGOs and charity workers to go unnoticed? Because we glorify something, we think they can do no wrong, and we think they're the epitome of what it means to be a good human being. Mother Teresa and her legions of charity workers literally refused contraception from thousands of women in Kolkata and exploited the slum dwellers by telling them not to go to the hospital because God will heal them. Yet nobody takes away the motherhood and the glorification that Mother Teresa comes with. Groups of charities within Haiti were involved in trafficking of sex workers within Haiti when they went in to help with the earthquake funds. It's very difficult to start an investigation. They are the epitome of what it means to save mankind. It's very difficult for us to hold these people accountable when society thinks they're the epitome of what it means to be positive and give back to society. We think with a more realistic depiction of them being human beings who can do mistakes and do make mistakes upholds, that's when you have better accountability under our side. And we think victims do deserve this accountability.
Within a capitalist framework, the ability of charity workers to buck the temptation of materialism in order to do something to help who are less disadvantaged is in fact unknown. Yes, we overglorify them, but the reason that us as a society overglorify them is to in fact rectify the severe imbalance that we have towards our impulses to gain material gains no matter the cost. We glorify them to rectify our own deficiency. We glorify them in order to correct this society. Ladies and gentlemen, there are three things in my speech today. Exactly, I'll explain furthermore on why exactly do we glorify them, and secondly, why exactly we need to glorify them in light of other motivations to participate in charity work, and thirdly, I'll talk about how glorification leads to efficient delivery of services. But before that, a few points about to say is that their problem with charity workers is that these guys tourism and so forth and conduct a lot of mismanagement with how they run the charity. The first thing to say is that yes, volunteerism do occur and it is an abhorrent practice, but it's not correct for them to paint a picture in which organizations commit wholly of their resources towards the volunteerism. What is more likely the case to be is that they are actually separated their activities to different things. They have marketing, and i.e. volunteerism is part of that, but also they significantly invest the amount of money that they get from marketing and volunteerism to invest in construction projects that actually actively help people. Because necessarily, the reason why this long-termist thing occur is because they are at its essence primarily motivated by the desire to want to help these guys. And secondly, the fact that these organizations do want to prove that they actually meet their KPI in terms of whatever that they're rejecting. That's the only reason why they're only allowed to set up the charity in the first place. So what is more likely to be the case is that there is a separation in between things, i.e. there's a marketing and then there's long-term projects. The second thing to say is about how about the glorification is being used as a veneer to mask the kind of mismanagement that occurs. We also contend to say that this is in fact not true. It is especially because Mother Teresa has committed all of these atrocities. We have put ever more highlight that on the kind of concerns and mismanagement that occur when foreign aid workers comes in. For instance, because of the prominence of this industry, when aid workers go down to Haiti, for instance, governments are actually put down observers. UN put down observers to monitor the kind of efficacy on the ground with regards to whether or not they actually deliver the services. My arguments. Why exactly do we need to glorify them, ladies and gentlemen? We glorify them, ladies and gentlemen, because we realize that they have bucked the trend towards giving in to the temptations of material gains. This is, well, we're talking about different kinds of workers here. Among the charity workers, we have admin people, we have doctors, we have possibly bodyguards. These are the kind of people who would be much more monetarily compensated if they had joined either the diplomat world, either the corporate world in which negotiations were, if they had joined a private hospital, or in terms of bodyguards, if they had joined the private mercenaries, for instance. These are the kind of people that forsook the material gains in order to benefit people, in order to help them, in order to help them. We think this is a good trend because, especially in the capitalist system where all values are replaced by money alone, we need people to be put on a pedestal so that to highlight there are things that are more valuable than money and how humanity is at stake here. Sarah said here, look, these people are not being paid enough. But the thing is, they are being paid enough. They're just not being paid in the exorbitant amount that they would have otherwise received in the private sector. But the more important thing to note here is this funding is limited. We would rather have charity workers allocate their funding more towards their causes as opposed to paying the charity workers. We realize here that there is a balance that needs to be struck here. We don't want them to be starving, but given the prominence of this charity industry, we think they have enough bargaining power to actually have a say when they are in fact monetarily oppressed by the framework in which we live in. So,
look, sure, now you know that Mother Teresa did wrong. Now we know that Haiti's girls were raped. But when those wrongs were happening, nobody wanted to bring up the investigations because we thought they were doing so much good for our society.
Yeah, precisely. We are saying that because those things have happened. We regret that they happened in the first place, but what we want to rectify further on later on, that we realize now that this industry have grown as that these charity workers have grown as an industry rather than ad hoc delivery of services which need not be regulated and monitored. We think there's a shift in the context which opening government is largely ignorant of. Secondly, why exactly do we need them to glorify specifically aid workers? Realize here, in terms of, we glorify them in myriad of ways, in terms of their charitability, but we glorify them in terms of their neutrality, in the commitment towards catering towards the poor and the children, regardless of political alliance. This gives them access towards areas that are heavily contested by civil wars, for instance. This allows them to deliver services in areas that government and political actors might not be able to. But the second thing to say about why we need to glorify them specifically, because in the absence of glorification of charity workers, we are left to glorify, to tell our children and our society that we need to glorify soldiers, that we need to glorify soldiers. Instinctively, they hold really radically different values, because soldiers, although they are respectable, at the end of the day, the values that they muster is one of violence, as opposed to the charity workers, in which is one of charitability and helping others. But secondly, if you don't glorify charity workers, you're more likely than not to left the vacuum to be filled by religious sentiments. This poses a significant enough problem, because necessarily this emboldens the religious rhetoric with regards to how the religion are always moral and the atheist secular sector of the society are always immoral. So there's a need to counteract that kind of narrative and prove to you that secular people are also moral. Thirdly, it's about how the permanence of the charity industry leads to an efficient delivery service. But at this point, it's best to leave that to Amsha. Ladies and gentlemen, what we need to realize here is this. In absence of glorification of charity workers, they have nothing to stand on.
Right.
Everything? Okay. My three extensions with all regards to movement will broadly handle the priorities of what a charity needs to do on the ground. One, we're going to discuss how you get more of the right kind of workers to join to a sustainable work on the ground and how glorification hurts that. Secondly, I'll talk about how glorification hurts us calling out abusers, which are important. And thirdly, this strange thing on religious rhetoric, how you need to look better than the religious people on the ground. Like some strange substantive from like body. Okay, first extension, they're on getting more workers. And before I want to discuss broadly, what kind of workers are necessary for charities to function? Because it is a lie for them to tell you that just by having more people on the ground, therefore equals good. Yeah. Because a lot of alleviating poverty requires you to have people with the knowledge and skills on development degrees, for example, knowing about business models, how to approach corporate partners if need be. People don't normally care about Instagram likes or hashtagging about like how good they look with orphans. People who with professional degrees. And the reason why we need these people is because alleviating poverty is also a long-term battle. You can't just go there every summer, build computers and not teach them how to use computers, leave, and then the next day the computer comes back broken or sold off. This means that the real work of charity isn't always Instagrammable or likable. It is often something which is often very unfortunate. You have to partner in industries, you may not get short-term payoffs, and these workers need to understand that. Having understood the kind of framing, therefore, what does over-glorification do in the attraction of people? Because the argument coming off Audi is that we want to attract doctors, but because charities can't afford to pay that much, you need to therefore compensate them by saying that your job is really rewarding to people, you get a hard service, therefore join us even if there's lower pay. The trouble is, when people are not stupid and they figure out that charity work is not going to rise up in the short run, oftentimes the best case scenario is that a lot of these young college graduates join this like Teach for America or Teach for Malaysia for about 2 or 3 years because of this reward, but they have no intention to stay in it as a long-term career. They pull out afterwards. And the trouble is, organizations like TFA and TFM function a lot on very short-term labor, which does it as an internship or take on the resume. I'm sure Chin will probably consider doing it at some point in his life, he can't get a job. That's the problem. It is all very short-term. We also think for the second group of individuals who have the heart to join anyway, one will point out that they'll probably join on both sides of the house. If people are that inclined on service, they're going to join charities. The trouble is, people who have the heart for the lost are the least likely to want to speak up for a raise, even if they do deserve it. The reason why we want to give these people a raise and higher pay anyway is because paying them high is also necessary to send a message of how we view society, how we value the poor. The amount that we pay these workers, even if it isn't much, also reverberates as what we think about the people they are helping. So if charity work is meant to be low wage, what does it tell you about the idea of helping the weak, the lost, and the orphans? We also further advance the news here, that the kind of positive messaging that you see of white hats in Syria running down, holding babies in their hands, the kind of media narrative that thrives on the sacrificial nun, the sacrificial volunteer, unfortunately underscores the real risk of burnout. Because as people's expectations in reality do not meet, they often burn out, they often leave, they deliver poor goods, or they like earn extra money by trafficking children in Haiti to sex rings. That is awful. The problem is this. At the point where we admit, in our world, maybe without the glorification, less people will join. But these people are probabilistically more likely to be permanent on the ground. And the reason why this is good for charity is that charities are often able to do much more sustainable long-term activities because they know their staff, even though less in number, are probably going to stay. We also further advance a further of analysis that if charities start to shrink in general and people are much more permanent, this often forces the government to step up rather than depend arbitrarily on a lot of like volunteers or bucket loads of people from Stanford and Oxford coming down to like Guatemala every holiday. No, not about you, artists, not everything's about you. So the idea is this, at the point when they come forward, overseas and like this often to rather dependent of people and if you remove that, it often forces the charities to function on attracting people through higher wages. Why is that critical? It is because you're probably going to get more lawyers, businessmen, people like me analytics who show the charities function if we are open, we're better able to negotiate. Because the contract allows them to impose their own deliver on the contract, that people partnership and fundraising at the status quo are often better able to target scarce charity dollars and donations for maximum impact because they have the networks and they're able to set up systems. Opposition cannot claim the status quo. Charities will somehow spend more on infrastructure like OD claims and somehow raise wages. Where is this money suddenly going to come from? Because his mechanism of glorification is directly contradictory to the pressure to increase wages and take this wage more seriously. Let's talk about, yeah, sure.
So this is a regret motion narrative you would expect to arise in the absence of glorification that will attract people to it. Understanding that charities can't magically get higher wages out of nowhere.
Correct. So what I've said, and I was very clear on this, is that in a world without charity glorification, the job will be advertised as is usually as close to the ground. Less people will join, but the charity will now be forced to compete to get people based on price. Charities will probably shrink, and we see that's probably a very good thing. This force governments to step up. Let's talk about fixing abusers, right? Now, the trouble with abusers, and we acknowledge that we need to like hold people accountable. The best case argument for opposition is that we hold these people accountable because we value, we'll treat them as paragons of virtue. If they fuck up, we will like destroy them. Now, here's the problem. It is still you often find out about abusers in the first place. The trouble is, oftentimes people in the charities are often afraid to report the abusers because they're afraid the charity will go under. That all the other people serve, they cannot possibly be responsible for the cessation of aid to those people. This is often why the Haiti child sex ring that was run by the UN was reported by a third party, not any of the US monitors on the ground. It took someone, a careless reporter from the Reuters, happened to stumble upon a piece of evidence. This means that it's very hard to institutionalize the structural check and balance on a charity in that way. Especially we are fighting against negative message. Charities often, because for all they talk about monetary Realized as a barrier in the workplace, they often happen after the fact because Mother Teresa's kind of like structural oppression of women went unnoticed for 50 years. In the counterfactual, where there's no glorification of the charity work, where we see them as workers who can be held accountable for, like you and me, there's no illusion of glory that takes away from society's desire to subject them to audits and to find out what they're like. Dealing quickly with this last strange argument that if we don't make the secular people look good, the religious people will look better. The trouble is, it's not a kind of binary. Religious people also do charity, and it's when you have the intersection of religious glorification of God and Allah or Zoroaster, and that becomes even worse. It is important to bring all these people who function on the glory of God down to us to tell them what is your bottom line, what is your metrics, how have you served, and only how do you serve comes out on-site government.
An average worker in an oil rig earns about 30K. This is a religious industry. It is the world that side government want to imagine. If you're willing to work in such charitable cause, where most of the time you have to work in war zones, as well as slums where crime are more likely to happen, that's the cost that you should be getting for putting your life at risk. But that 30K feed up to thousands of families for a month, and that's the cost that you need to sacrifice under their paradigm, something that we are not willing to undertake on our side. Compartmentalized into 4 different areas. Number 1, why some governments are not dependable. Number 2, why the creation of an industry is important for sustainability and is like a better model in contrast to what such government is proposing. Number 3, why glorification, especially when it comes to conflict zones and so on. And number 4, what happens in a vacuum when you don't glorify these charity workers. And these issues directly clashes with most of the stuff that Lucas and Sarah identified in their debate. Sit down. First of all, why some governments are not dependable. If you look at some governments, for example, failing governments in Syria as well as Haiti, have no control over how funding or how aids are being transmitted back to the people. This is where it is extremely important that we need NGO as charity replace rest, because it is unfair for them to simply come and say, when less numbers of charity workers exist in a country, all of a sudden the government will be responsible. Because you need to also understand, in some spectrum, governments cannot function and cannot simply operate the spectrum. But number 2, if you are heavily reliant on government, which means we're looking at countries where there's a high poverty rate, more likely than ever, this government that you're going to depend are more likely to be corrupted, more likely than ever to want to spend that money within their people of their own supporters. In contrast to what Audi have explained in his speech, when you glorify these other people, they're now being pressured to be neutral. You have to help everyone, and you can be selective in your help. And this glorification is the one that makes sure that an element of neutrality maintains, and that's a takeaway from our side in contrast to what OG promised in today's debate. Sit down. Second clash of today's debate in regards to how do we see charity industry in the long term. Number 1, on our side, when we're able to cater and utilize the glorification, this is how we are able to create industry. 2 scenarios are more likely to happen. Sit down. First scenario is what like Lucas explained. People come and leave and so on. Like for example, teach for Malaysia and teach for America. But you need to understand, due to the existence of glorification, this vacuum are usually filled immediately after someone leaves, and automatically it creates a sustainable industry. Top players or the creators of TFM as well as TFA still maintains within that particular area and manages that particular foundation to begin with. So we think it's a sustainable model on our side, and therefore we won't be suffering lack of personnel joining in contrast to their paradigm, because in their paradigm everything will be placed on a materialistic gain trade-off and so on. And that's something that Lucas is unwilling to engage in terms of what do we replace the vacuum, when people are more likely entailed to go for material gain over any other gains. Therefore, we think it's a large concession on their side. But second of all, in regards to creation of industry and how it decides and how it creates accountability and like self-check and balance, as what they have portrayed and they have presented to us in terms of Mother Teresa, as well as what happened in Haiti and so on. Obviously, we regret those kind of things happening, but we learn from those kind of mistakes. And the creation of an identity industry, a sustainable industry, means future charity groups will have to adhere to this high KPI and to ensure such mistake doesn't occur. This is why we now regulate and go and check the books of religious organizations, because we don't trust them anymore after the atrocity that happened within Mother Teresa to begin with. This is why we check the books of a lot of charity groups and make sure the money actually goes to people in Gaza and so on. And we think it can only happen when you have a sustainable flow of people and you don't let that charity die. Glorification, make sure that happens. Sit down. Third issue, conflict zones. This is the most contentious area, because in order for you to even enter conflict zone to begin with, it is not enough for you to give money, because what's the point of me getting money if I die at the end of the day? Even for a military person to join, you spur him up with nationalism and heroic action. That's how we need an equal amount of force to tell people that you are doing something good. People are dying on the ground. You should sacrifice yourself. There's like groups of borders as well as a white helmet exists. They don't care for their life. What they care is to care for the people, and they're okay with being worshipped by the hero. They're altruistic. And this happened because of glorification. There is no alternative for people to remain on both areas. That's why glorification is important, to cover the vacuum of both areas. Because of lack of manpower, glorification means people like all of these Oxford grads and so on feel entitled and wanting to enter, although even for a few months. The amount of expertise and the amount of contribution here is better than 3 people operating that particular charity group and working there as that particular project runs, because you can't simply build a house with only 2 or 3 people in contrast to our paradigm. Last issue, the dangers of not having glorification and what such vacuum creates. In themselves, we want to be praised. Like I want to be like 6 or something. But what if there's no glorification? There's a vacuum here. The only element that encourages people to do good deeds without human being facing that because of give my money to Muslim people who are out this election, because it's not simply in mind with my lords. This is negative. That's it. Paradigm. That is something that we are unwilling to take. We would prefer. Thank you.
Opening house makes the assumption that everywhere where more people joining charities is an A priority. Always true. Sometimes charity work comes at the expense of donation or political change, which we're going to put to you. Uniquely enclosing government is the best and only way to sustainably uplift the disadvantaged. We're going to follow 2 points of extension. First of all, about how we can uplift the disadvantaged. Second of all, I'm going to extend further on the incentives of people to join charities and what kind of charities they are joining. It's a good thing that people go to war zones and are not paid well, because this money can go to charity and helping the poor. This is ridiculous, because we think that we attract a larger number of people to volunteer, and this makes the more money that is given to charity worthwhile. $30,000 extra to a charity means nothing if there are not more aid workers on the ground to dispense vital food and water to individuals. Mention that if pay is so low, often it is the richest and most privileged individuals who actually volunteer to begin with, and individuals who are poor, who cannot afford the time that it takes to volunteer, will not choose to sign up for charity work. This is problematic because richer people tend to be practical understanding of how to help people with this committed industry where people live and are replaced, and having a culture of glorification allows for this. We think it's actually harmful that people continually live and are replaced. High turnover is a bad thing for charities. Why? Because charities need long-term volunteers, which often improve their skills via years and years of experience. Often, the skill improvement scale is exponential. Like, for example, in the case of paramedics, the senior paramedics do. So, we think it's very important that charity just pass is what you call source. We encourage long-term individuals. We think most self-incentives to just translate the long-term views of we find this highly counterintuitive. It seems like unbiased media reporting that could be based on attention drawn from past scandals, for example, is sufficient in order to draw attention to these abusers. We don't need glorification to draw attention to these abusers. That's opening quite frankly pointed out quite well, and they didn't respond to. Often glorification shields its charities for abusers and forms a convenient excuse. First point of extension about how we uplift the disadvantaged. Let's ask a basic question. How does the glorification of charity work? It elevates charity workers to a rarefied position on the elevated pedestal. It creates the image that charity workers are sanely classed different from everywhere else on the basis of their courage of moral virtue and the self-sacrifice that they engage in. We think that this leads to a number of harms in terms of the impact on both the public and potential volunteers to these charities. What are these harms? First of all, it means that members of the public in general can feel that they can externalize their moral obligations to the poor. They can outsource them to individuals working in charity. We know that public apathy towards individuals living in poverty is often driven not just by a lack of awareness, but also the impression that the problem is not as severe. There is someone out there to tackle it for them with years of experience. Once people feel like they can outsource their moral obligations to this verified class of individuals, to a talented class of professionals, they are less likely to care. No, thank you. In terms of everyday actions about helping the disadvantaged. This leads to a number of impacts, which I will clearly enumerate. First of all, it means that people without a background in charity work may not volunteer at all, because they believe that they are not worthy, because they believe that they have no experience in doing this, and therefore we should outsource this job to people who are better qualified or better able to do so. But moreover, we think the greater harm is that they may just not donate to charity because they think the job is being done by charity workers, because they believe that charity workers are fulfilling, these miracle workers are fulfilling the needs of people on the ground. And this is problematic because the biggest issue that charitable organizations face is not necessarily a lack of labor, but a lack of funding. Just choosing, for example, to donate your income to a Kickstarter campaign to finance a local innovation, or putting your spare change in the box at the counter for Yellow Ribbon is in fact hugely important for these charities in terms of deciding what they are able to do and the capacity to enact change in the real world. Although we think it's highly problematic because often the best way that talented individuals can contribute to charity is not to volunteer or just to do nothing, which might happen on opposition. It is to donate. That's why the top 100 richest people contribute over $100 billion in charity, which goes a long way rather than many of these individuals had just chosen to volunteer. That is a comparative narrative that closing opposition demanded from opening government. It means that we glorify the outcomes of charity and we glorify the good work that charitable donations do, as opposed to glorifying charity workers as some kind of mythical miracle workers that we can then outsource our moral obligations to. So our counter narrative is that we glorify the outcomes, not glorify the workers and the people involved. Moreover, we think that secondly, on the deeper level, the glorification of charity workers creates the belief that big charity and not big government is the solution to poverty. This happens on two levels. First of all, it happens between states, where often charities operating in LEDCs are glorified because they portray themselves as overcoming barriers like corrupt government, like local factionalism. At least that's how the media reports it when they glorify these charities. This detracts from the only sustainable solution that many of these many of these poverty-stricken people require, which is that we need the first world to work with many of these governments to grant aid and grant access to form long sustainable partnerships and improve local infrastructure. Yes?
More often than not, these big charities are the ones who form partnership with big governments to develop sustainable plans to help the poor.
Yes, but often, glorification of these charities comes at the expense of vilifying these governments and showing that they overcame barriers like bureaucratic red tape, for example, like local factionalism. And as a consequence, we think it's mutually exclusive. Moreover, we think that it's often important that governments themselves set up international aid channels, for example, to allow many of these local governments to form sustainable solutions to poverty. Moreover, we think on a second level, this happens within states as well. You're far more likely to do things like vote for socialist governments and pro-labor policies, or actually campaign for quantifiable change when you don't believe the problem is being taken care of by charity workers who are elevated to the status of miracle workers. So we think that this creates more sustainable change because the best way to help the disadvantaged in our societies is not by charities which tend to be transient and rely on inconsistent sources of funding and workers. It is to provide sustainable solutions in the form of institutional policies like minimum wage, for example, that actively uplift the disadvantaged. We think this is therefore the most important point in this debate because it forms a solid and tangible solution to how we solve the problem of poverty and uplift the disadvantaged. There's a point about how religious groups will step into this vacuum as well. I don't think we need to stand for religious groups. We can regret the glorification of religious groups as well. Also, we know that they often intersect with charity groups because many religious groups are tax-exempt charities. So we don't think it's that relevant coming from opening opposition. Second point of extension about how the people who join charities and their incentives. So, okay, how kind of people joining charities. So what we're going to put to you is that it leads to one kind of charities. We think that some charity people are just generous. Where people only join charity work that can gain them the most self-indulgence, leads them to join the most public-facing charities, the ones that spend the most in terms of competing with others in advertising, the work that is glitzier, for example. Therefore, you're far more likely to join PETA than like Conservation International, even though frankly no one knows what PETA does, right? And they might not be that good for the world to begin with. So within the comparative is that people actually read up and become more informed about the charities that they're going to join before they join them, and not just join the ones that are the most public-facing and they spend and blow the most amount of money on advertising, just wasted money. So, because we've proven to you that the most important point of this debate, that of donations, falls to our side, go with closing down.
Without getting more donations. They cannot just say that without attention, without social media, without the sexiness of charity work, charity organizations will exist to the same scale and scope as they do today. The idea of an opening government that you can somehow have a bidding war to start paying charity workers like they are contract workers is quite frankly absurd, because the amount of money that you get as a charity organization comes primarily from the fact that we glorify altruism, that we glorify people who are willing to make these sacrifices, to toil for long thankless hours in drudgery and quite frankly shitty work. We think they inherently deserve glorification because they are self-sacrificing regardless of the outcomes, but I will also prove why their outcomes are good. Before I start my extension, a bit of context and framing. I think the alternatives that we have to contest is the fact that we live in an increasingly distant and individualized world due to an increasing uncertainty about our economic prospects, about housing, about the possibility of conflict. So in the absence of glorification, you get a system where individuals focus only on themselves with the belief that our responsibility to other people stops when we come to issues that do not directly impact us or our friends. There is no incentive on their side for us to diminish our own comfort and material wealth, even if we think in principle those who are less well off than us have the same intrinsic moral worth and should be considered at the same level as we are. Quite frankly, Speaker, people are selfish. It is completely naive of government to pretend otherwise. The comparative then is that you don't get the same number of charity workers. Closing government says, so the real issue is not the number of charity workers, but rather the amount of money you have. So here's some direct refutation that's also part of context. While it is true that the same amount of money donated would probably probably make a bigger difference. The frank fact is charities are still desperately understaffed despite the number of workers that they have. And regardless of how much money you have, you still need warm bodies to volunteer to give out soup at a soup kitchen. You can't simply say that charities are going to be able to operate on a sudden lack of manpower given the number of people that will be leaving on our side. Second of all, here's why you get less money in charities on their side. First of all, because emotional labor is already deeply undervalued in our world, right? Sarah considered this when she points out that we undervalue professions like teaching, we also undervalue nursing and other forms of feminine coded labor. The problem is that they don't do anything to change that on their side. They have provided us with no mechanism for why society is suddenly going to start valuing emotional labor to the degree that we expect that it will be. No, thank you. And I'll give you more on that later. Therefore, the comparative is that charities get less money and they also get less people, making them far less efficacious, and we think that is bad. What then happens? Because of the low pay and because of the sudden overwork that fewer charity workers now have to take on, all the impacts of burnout that Lucas was talking about becomes more pronounced on his side. No, thank you. Let's do a few more quick responses here because they are also part of context. Closing government then tries to say, so this is about long-run sustainability, right? You can't have people moving in and out of jobs. Listen, presumably it would be better for charity workers to direct their scarce resources for salary to try and retain people in upper-level management positions. Because frankly, at the lower levels where you are interacting with people on the ground, it is good for you to have volunteers that move quickly in and out, even if they leave after 2 years. We think that because they are working on the ground, you are more likely to be able to train them and get replacements than upper-level workers rather than paying them on the same rate. 2 points of extension. First of all, equality and altruism. Second of all, advocacy. First of all, altruism. We think that the main thesis of this argument is that we glorify workers because we know it's really shit work, right? And we do it despite the fact that it's really hard work. We think in principle, this is a praiseworthy deed and we should therefore accordingly glorify them too. So charity workers in this case are individuals who make sacrifices in the name of altruism, right? They care about lost causes that nobody else wants to care about because governments are fundamentally reactive only to public pressure as opposed to working in niche causes that only charities can focus on. Because governments are largely broad scale and generic, caring only about national level issues, you need charity workers to fill in the gaps in the kinds of niche causes that the public doesn't yet care about. No, thank you. What does the glorification of charity workers do? In many cases, there are thankless jobs otherwise, right? I've characterized this. This is in principle wrong because we believe people should be recognized for the amount of work they do. So despite the fact that charity workers contribute far more to society on an individual level than hedge fund managers get a ton more recognition, a ton more press, and a ton more money. In the absence of material compensation, which OG has not proven that they will get, and CG hasn't proven either, we think that it's good they at least get some sort of recognition. So they don't get money on either side. We recognize that. At least on our side, we thank them and we say, we understand you are doing valuable work. We understand emotional labor. Thank you so much for doing this for all of us. Second point on advocacy, and this is more stuff on how we get money on our side, lobbying and actual change that also deals with closing up government. Donations get more likely when you glorify charity work. Why? When you glorify something, you get more attention given to them, right? Believe that you have people in order to have people to donate in the first place. It's not putting people on a pedestal, right? You don't all are special and you can never reach them. Rather, you treat them as role models that you can aspire to, and then it's made even easier right now with the accessibility of social media. So charity work now comes in many forms. It takes the form also of the Ice Bucket Challenge, which actually raised a lot of money for ALS research. It also takes the form of Kickstarter campaigns, which are ever more accessible to you now because of social media. Easier it is for you to do charity work. So when you start seeing charity work as something, you think like that person. That's how you motivate people on an individual level to get over that inertia with activities taking that, making it a lobbying. I still point out that there are tons of charities for doing sexy causes, because if you don't have that, you then don't have the charities sacrificing their life for that. Or you get charitable work that is far quieter, far more underfunded because it is less obvious. You get people who are far less willing to get over that inertia and give back to society to be part of something far greater than themselves. I have never been prouder to oppose.
There we go.
Mr. Speaker, opening debate makes the presumption that charity is an a priori good. That is often not the case. The problem very frequently is not the lack of charity workers, but the lack of donations, as Arthur told you. It's about the lack of social and political pressure to reform capitalism. We think that the glorification of charity workers leads to the failure of effective altruism. First, because often the best way for talented individuals to help the disenfranchised is by accumulating wealth and donating rather than charity work. See the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for an example of what constitutes a path to success. Second, it leads to the failure of effective altruism because the best way for society as a whole to help the disenfranchised is by campaigning for quantifiable policy change. For example, voting for socialist reform, implementing wealth transfer, etc. As Arthur told you, it is not to put faith in big charity to replace big government. We were challenged by closing what our frame was. Our frame is simple. Instead of glorifying charity work, we should have glorified effective altruism instead. This is a counterfactual world in which we have preferred to celebrate. And we pointed towards the burgeoning movement today for effective altruism. It's a growing philosophical movement that believes that the best way to help those who are in need is not to volunteer, not to spend time on the ground, but rather to donate your money either to charities or to the government in order for them to be able to effectively ensure change. So we think this is the counterfactual world that we stand for, answering the challenge on closing. I just want to talk to you about how we better distribute both individual and social political capital to help the problem of disenfranchisement. So here's what currently happens. Charity workers are endemically underpaid. I think everybody agrees with this. And this means that the privileged or economically secure individual is the one who tends to opt for charity work. And there are two harms to this. First, as Lucas points out, the bulk of charity workers are short-term contracts that allow them to burnish their CVs while serving underprivileged communities at the same time. The impact that Lucas missed out is that there is then a dearth of deep skills, which means that there are extremely few career-rich charity workers who are genuinely able to help those on the ground, closing the loop for opening government. Secondly, most charity workers end up not coming from minority communities. If I grew up in the slums of Nairobi, I won't aspire to be an underpaid charity worker. I will instead want to be a lawyer or a doctor. And this means that the very people whom we need in grassroots charity groups, those who intimately understand the impact of poverty on the community, are the least likely to step up. And this is why it hurts me when they laughed at Arthur's argument. Because in their paradigm, you get workers who are well-intentioned but out of touch. This is how you get the white college girl teaching English to a community she barely understands, she's unable to connect with on any intuitive level. No, thank you. We would rather have far fewer charity workers, but the charity workers who remain are those who have deeper skills and the deeper capacity to interact with those locals and on the ground. That is closing the loop for opening. I hope we take a bench really here. But here's where, right? We extend the debate. Because the biggest problem is not that not enough money is going to charities in the first place. The root cause is the glorification of charity workers. Because when you put charity on a pedestal, that's when society believes that it can externalize moral duty to help the underprivileged, rather than not actually donating. No, thank you. How does this work? It happens because you create the narrative that the only way or the best way to help those who are in need is by suffering for 4 weeks in Kenya, rather than the simple counter-narrative that the best way to help is by donating $1 a day to community chest. The unsexy but hard truth. This means that we ensure more donations on our side. What do we hear from their team? First, charities are still understaffed. This is a problem. This does not square with their later claim that people are selfish. Let me explain. So if it is true that charities are still understaffed, this means that there are only so many warm-hearted people. It's true that there are only X number of warm-hearted people, X plus Y people to staff charities. So why comes from ensuring that charity workers are paid better? Because you tap into the fact that people are selfish to ensure a fairer wage. You just contradicted yourself in your speech. But moreover, even if we neglect that, right? What do we hear from closing? We glorify workers because it's shitty work. You understand? We don't care. We think that the needs of charity workers should be subservient to the needs of communities on the ground. Right? I think this is a very clear thing that all teams would agree on. We then heard we need charities to fill in the niche work and the gaps that governments cannot do.
Note, Mr. Speaker, we've never heard any characterization of what these gaps are. We argue that the gaps in government work depend on what prevailing attitudes towards social economic structures currently exist. If the prevailing attitude is one of neoliberalism, then the gaps in government ability to provide for people on the ground will be very large because there's a dearth of government resources to do things that ensure universal basic income, to ensure things like retrenchment insurance. At the point at which we tell people that the best way to help with this privilege is by ensuring political capital to vote in socialist parties or to vote in redistributed policies. That's when the gaps that governments have are reduced. We reduce the need for charities to step in to fill the gaps which are left behind by
government for accountability of the plights of the poor, and these are mainly driven by charity workers. So therefore, why is it not their interest to work hard?
So here's a very interesting thing, and this is where I really provide you analysis, right? If I'm a charity worker and I work in a foreign country, for example, helping people who are disprivileged in the Philippines and Singapore, the attention to the plight is the plight of the Philippine person I'm helping, as well as my charity work. The attention is not drawn to any local needs in Singapore. We would rather a situation where there is greater discussion on inequality in a localized manner, deeper discussion on how I as a member of my community can best help localized problems. That is a more effective and more localized concept of how we close the gaps in government services for people. So the problem is a democratic failure because the suffering that you are glamorizing is not suffering that I as an individual voter in Singapore can help, because suffering is happening overseas. So we will much rather instead, glamorize the suffering that's existing within your own country. What do we do next year? And I love this. Ante told us about advocacy. When we glamorize charity work, they are then treated as role models. The problem is twofold. First, this leads to a race to the most gratuitous. In order for you to be treated as a role model, you want to ensure that your suffering is Instagrammable. Oh look, I just spent 2 weeks in Cambodia building schools. But there is less of a focus, therefore, on the actual people you're supposed to help, thereby undercutting everything that I told you about. How the focus should not be on the charity worker, but the focus should be instead on what is the most effective means we can help people on the ground. Second problem, I'm not sure how the mechanism works. If it is true that I have MDG as a role model, and if it's true that I'm inherently selfish, i.e. I'm not inherently interested in an MDG style of charity worker, why am I more likely to want to emulate him? Isn't it more likely that I'm like, oh no, wow, they're just so good, they're doing so much with their lives, how can I possibly ever hope to match up with them? The overwhelming social fetishization with suffering, with these role models, are actually what makes people less likely to want to help, because they feel alienated, you create more inertia on your side. Because we are how effective altruism works. Because we reject the idea that charity and suffering carries any innate inherent value. I am so proud to be altruism.
Thank you. Last speaker of the
Speaker, so let's ask what exactly charity work is and return back to Nigeria, and therefore talk about why glorification, firstly, is politically desirable, and therefore we ought not to regret it, something that not dealt with by Chinmi. Challenges of charity work is also why that's good. Right, so we recognize this has come up because we start to agree with opening government this idea that charity work is difficult on paid. The reality is often difficult, often dangerous situations. The reason why we know this is because we talk about things like, for instance, like sanitation, things like refugee camps, and the fact that individuals give up their lives, give up years, whether 2 years or 4 weeks of your life, still we consider hardship, and we still consider it a sacrifice. And the reason why we consider that important, the reason why we glorify them, particularly, is we recognize that they are acting against what our otherwise more baser instincts might be, where we might be more selfish to go against our natural selfish instincts. And that's desire, right? And that's why we glorify them. And for the first principle thing, we think, given that that is simply the reality, and we think that it is something that they ought to be praised for because it's something that they are doing which is inherently good, we think that you ought to glorify them. But I think more importantly, the glorification itself, and so most of the debate coming up from governments is not being engaging with an idea that it is inherently good, but also just simply going through an issue of practicality. Does this achieve what a few desired ends? And so we see a government that is focusing on two entirely separate sets of charity workers. We see on opening government the idea that they want to talk about full-time workers, the question of how it results in exploitation of full-time workers, they want to talk about that quite a well, and then the whole question of whether they're willing to talk about rich white kids in closing. So let's ask a few questions about how the exact mechanisms of glorification work. This is an analysis that comes up fairly exclusively in Ernting's extension, right? We think there are two particular mechanisms, and this deals effectively with Chinmi's idea of altruistic, effective altruism The assumption of, in this because this results in the recruitment of rich white kids or rich individuals. This necessarily means a trade-off between donations and advocacy. This is Chinese logic, right? Because the argument is you spend so much money to go and spend 2 weeks in Guatemala that the money should be better spent on donations. That is precisely Arthur's logic. And I'll explain firstly why there's not a trade-off, and in fact, it's helpful, right? Why? Because the glorification of the charity worker, firstly, is useful as a mechanism for achieving donations in the very first place, because you have an individual with whom you can identify with and you're donating to an individual. You're putting a face to a person. For instance, you're saying, I'm donating to this charity to then support these charity workers in the work that they do. The importance of the Glorification Act is the fact that firstly we say that we trust them because we've glorified them to show that they are good people, and so we trust them with our money. But more than that, we also glorify them because we glorify them by the fact that they're doing good work, and that's why we're giving money to the cause. So we think the glorification itself as a mechanism spurs donation. That's important. But more than that, the reason why it spurs advocacy as well is the fact that now you see charity workers working on the ground. This is an analysis that comes up with nothing dealt with by Jimmy, right? So the reality here is you see individuals who are working hard and making all these sacrifices. And the reality is not everybody makes those sacrifices, right? Not everybody feels that they are able to. But the point is then you recognize that because of their agency, their ability to make those sacrifices, presumably you could make even smaller sacrifices, whether that be money, but also in advocacy, basic things like signing petitions and so forth. And we so see that case, the altruism, because we're opening up, started talking about the idea of role models, we complete the logic by showing that how that is meaningful in terms of impacting to actual concrete outcomes. But why is this important in terms of the mutual exclusivity? So let's deal with some of the arguments coming up in terms of the impacts coming up from government. So let's deal firstly with how this helps, for instance, full-time workers, because their argument is the glorification of showing how they're poor and impoverished and willing to make more likely bad workers. You see, firstly, the reality of the exploitation of, and we recognize that it's regrettable that they are underpaid. The reality is, the reason why they are underpaid is because there's a lack of funding. The solution then is that we should increase glorification rather than reduce it. Because if glorification is a mechanism by which we can increase donations, we think the solution is to increase glorification, not take away. Because they've never shown us what is the alternative in their scenario. If we remove glorification, why are people going to donate more? Because what? Now is like starving African children and put them in pictures of trains. I think it's probably better that we at least glorify adults, for instance, of consent, than we talk about, for instance, dealing with victims and glorifying victims or talking about their victimhood, right? So we think the alternative is better under the scenario, in this case, especially since it works. So we think we solve that problem by the fact that we have glorification. So it's a regrettable situation that you don't have enough funding. Solve it in that case. If you regret to remove glorification, it simply worsens. You apply to these full-time workers. Sit down. But furthermore, we want to also engage with the idea of rich white kids, the idea of effective altruism in closing. Because this is precisely the logic, right? If individuals engage in volunteerism, where they spend 2 weeks or so in Cambodia, for instance, working in orphanages, why is this valuable? It's valuable in a lot of ways. Firstly, it often means that for many of these individuals, they come back being changed. Now, whether we like it or not, this often has a lasting impact on people. And we think just reducing it to the idea of you've just Instagrammed it and you've only done it for your own popularity, we think is false and extremely callous. But furthermore, we think that the reality is, even if one individual ends up going there and being changed and, for instance, engaging in advocacy as a result of what they've seen and what they've experienced, we think that's valuable. Moreover, especially since the rich white kids, right, we don't think that you have an incentive to give everything up all of a sudden become this charity worker, just to, in the fact that it's, especially since now you've removed any glorification, or you're simply telling them, look, it's a really shit job, I think I'm enjoying and really committed to the cause. It's not clear why they would suddenly want to give that up. At least in this situation, we give them the opportunity to get involved. Furthermore, now we think that they're more likely to be engaged with the cause, to donate to that cause. It's especially important. If you want to talk about people in Stanford, Oxford, or whatever kind of elitist institution we want, we think the reality is, if these people are the levers of power, through their experience, we think that's valuable in terms of advocacy itself. So we think that effective altruism is helped by the glorification if it means that more people are willing to go to experience what charity workers do because they look up to charity workers and they want to do the same thing. But then the argument coming up finally in the question of in the idea of so Lucas talks about, as well as Sarah talks about, but the idea that we are blind to their mistakes and we therefore are more dismissive, or we tend to ignore the problems and abuses that occur. We think this has been quite adequately dealt with, never again brought up again or defended. The reality is that, look, the glorification of these individuals, firstly, we think it's right that they often are doing good things. When you talk about Mother Teresa, the reality why it's such a big deal is because she was the exception to the cause, and that's why we're so astounded by the fact that someone we imagine to be so altruistic turned out so bad. I believe in the better instincts of individuals. But moreover, precisely the fact that there was this huge amount of backlash suggests that the glorification effect was effective, right? Because we glorify them, because you consider them to be so sacred, the backlash is so much greater when they betray that trust. We think the glorification is good. We think glorification betters people and pushes people to do better things for society. We are very glad to glorify charity work.
Too early in the break round. Is this off?
I think it's this one is still on.
Oh. Goodbye, world.